Braunschweig, Germany, June 2025. At first, it looked like any other case file buried on a prosecutor's desk. A €1,500 payment had been logged, processed, and tied to a convicted criminal's court fine. Paperwork done. Prison sentence nearly over. The man, known to global headlines as the prime suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, was days away from walking free. Then came the email. It arrived from an address with a familiar domain. A retired agent from the Bundeskriminalamt, Germany's federal criminal police, the BKA, a former investigator, a woman who had once worked on sex crimes and, ironically, had briefly intersected with the Christian Brückner file. She was the person who, just weeks earlier, had paid his outstanding court fines, unknowingly unlocking his early release. Now, she wanted the money back. "I made a mistake," she wrote. "I was unaware that Christian B. had been convicted in previous cases, including forgery and sexual offences. I therefore wish to contest my declaration of intent and invalidate the legal transaction accordingly." Prosecutors were stunned. The timing was critical. Brückner was due to be released after serving time for the 2005 rape of a 72-year-old woman in Praia da Luz, the same region where Madeleine vanished in 2007. If the fine reversal went through, he would stay in prison. If not, he could walk free and disappear, possibly forever. German officials confirmed they were seriously reviewing the legality of the refund request. If granted, it could buy time, precious time, for investigators still chasing justice in one of the world's most haunting cold cases. But the story didn't begin in that courtroom. It began 18 years earlier, in a sleepy seaside village in Portugal, with the soft rustling of curtains, an open sliding door, and a mother's scream that echoed across the world. May 3rd, 2007, Praia da Luz, Algarve coast. The McCann family was halfway through their week-long holiday at the Ocean Club Resort. It was the kind of place that promised peace. Pastel-coloured villas, cobbled walkways, families sipping wine while their children napped nearby. It was safe, or so they believed. That evening, Kate and Jerry McCann joined 7 friends at the resort's tapas restaurant. It was just 55 meters from their apartment. They were within shouting distance. The group had arranged a child-checking rotation. Every 20 minutes, someone would go look in on the kids. The sliding doors to the apartment were left unlocked. At 9:05 p.m., Jerry returned from checking the children. He later said all 3 were asleep, Madeleine, age 3, and her younger twin siblings. Nothing seemed off. But just over an hour later, when Kate took her turn, everything changed. "I knew instantly," she said later. "The door was open. The window, the shutter, it was up." The bed where Madeleine had been sleeping was empty. Kate McCann ran screaming back to the restaurant. A witness recalled her repeating the same words, again and again, her voice cracking with terror. "They've taken her! They've taken Madeleine!" Within minutes, the staff and guests were out with flashlights. Police were called, but the response was slow. Borders were not closed. No amber alerts, no roadblocks. A single sketchy sighting. A man carrying a small child in pajamas surfaced but wasn't pursued with urgency. By dawn, the tiny resort town was a global crime scene. But something crucial had already been lost. Time. In the days that followed, the case attracted an avalanche of international media attention. The McCanns made desperate appeals. Pope Benedict XVI met them personally. Celebrities donated to a search fund. Private jets were chartered to investigate leads. And yet, no one could say where Madeleine was, or who had taken her. The Portuguese police, inexperienced with this scale of media scrutiny, soon found themselves under pressure. They fumbled with procedures. The apartment was not sealed properly. Potential witnesses weren't cross-examined. Within weeks, speculation turned inward, toward the McCanns themselves. On September 7, 2007, Kate and Jerry were declared arguidos, formal suspects. A tabloid frenzy followed, whispers of sedatives, DNA samples, sniffer dogs hitting on blood in a rental car. But nobody, no confession, and no credible forensic evidence In July 2008, the Arguido status was dropped. The case went cold. The McCanns returned to England empty-handed, their daughter's fate unresolved, their names forever tied to the one question they couldn't answer. What happened to Madeleine? By mid-May 2007, just 2 weeks after Madeleine vanished, her image was etched into the world's consciousness. The wide hazel eyes, the slight collarboma in her right pupil, the pink and white outfit from her final photo. The case wasn't just news, it was global obsession. The British press deployed full-time reporters to Praia da Luz. Tabloids churned out front pages daily. Find Maddie posters wallpapered bus stops across Europe. Jerry McCann flew to Washington, D.C. and Brussels. Private detectives were hired. Crime Stoppers hotlines were overwhelmed. And yet, with every lead that came in, the hope faded faster. There were reports of a blonde toddler seen in Morocco, then in Malta. A Dutch tourist claimed she saw a man rush away from the resort with a small girl. A woman in Spain said she was certain she spotted Madeleine in a petrol station. Each report lit up headlines, then quietly collapsed under scrutiny. The Portuguese Polícia Judiciária struggled under pressure. Their experience was local. The case was anything but. Critics accused them of mishandling the early hours, allowing potential evidence to be contaminated or ignored. Journalists circled like sharks. British police sent advisors who sometimes clashed with their Portuguese counterparts. With no clear suspect, no demand for ransom, and no new clues, the media narrative turned, and fast. By July, the McCanns were no longer the grieving parents of a stolen child. They were, in some headlines, suspects. Portuguese officials cited cadaver dogs allegedly hitting on blood scent in a car the couple rented weeks after the disappearance. Hair samples were taken. Analysts claimed trace DNA might match Madeleine's. Unnamed sources suggested sedation, accidental death, and cover-up. Kate McCann, once the devastated mother, became a media scapegoat. Cold, too composed, too photogenic. It didn't matter that there was no motive, no forensic proof, no timeline that made sense. The public love story was twisting into suspicion. On September 7, 2007, both Kate and Jerry were officially declared arguidos, formal suspects under Portuguese law. The backlash was immediate and severe. Donors to the search fund pulled back. Tabloids speculated daily about guilt. Then, in July 2008, the case was archived. No charges. The McCann's arguido status was dropped. The silence that followed was deafening. For a while, it looked like the mystery would die in the files of the PJ. But in 2011, the British government authorised Operation Grange, a full-scale Scotland Yard review of the case. Detectives combed through 100,000 pages of evidence. They re-interviewed witnesses, rebuilt timelines, issued new EFITs. And once again, hope flickered, but nothing stuck. Every potential suspect dissolved under pressure. Each clue faded in the glare of reanalysis. DNA evidence was inconclusive. Witness memory had gone soft. Praia da Luz, once sharp in the minds of investigators, was now just another postcard town swallowed by time. By 2015, the Operation Grange team was cut from 30 officers to just 4. Madeleine McCann was still missing, and the trail had all but vanished. For over a decade, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann had remained suspended in a fog of missed opportunities, dead ends, and fading hope. Then, in June 2020, a jolt reverberated across headlines worldwide. German police had a suspect, a name, a face, a man with a deeply disturbing past. His name was Christian Brückner. To many in Praia da Luz at the time, he was just another scruffy drifter, a German expat in his early 30s, living in a weathered camper van, bouncing between temporary jobs and the fringes of society. He kept a low profile, even as he parked just minutes from where the McCanns were staying. But the truth, investigators would later uncover, was far darker. Brückner had a long criminal history stretching back to his teens: theft, drug trafficking, child sexual abuse, even accusations of violent assault. He was a convicted paedophile, a manipulator of vulnerable people, and a man who seemed to operate just beneath the radar. He collected stolen passports, used multiple aliases, and avoided fixed addresses. His van, a faded cream and yellow Volkswagen camper, was not just his home, but his sanctuary. Witnesses recalled seeing young women coming and going, and sometimes children. Police would later seize that same vehicle during a search, along with a USB stick filled with disturbing images, hidden beneath the carcass of his dead dog. But what finally pulled Brückner into the center of the McCann investigation was data. Phone records placed him in Praia da Luz on the very night Madeleine vanished. Not just in the area, his phone had connected to a cell tower less than a mile from the Ocean Club. At 7:32 p.m., just hours before Kate McCann raised the alarm, Brückner's mobile received a 30-minute call from a Portuguese number. It was the kind of quiet, buried clue that hadn't mattered in 2007, until technology and hindsight gave it weight. Even more damning, the very next day, he re-registered his Jaguar XJR6 to another name, despite already owning it for years. To detectives, it looked like a deliberate move to throw off any potential link to the vehicle. But there was more. In 2008, while drinking with friends at a bar in Germany, Brückner allegedly referenced Madeleine's disappearance. According to one witness later interviewed by police, he remarked coldly, "She didn't scream." It wasn't an outright confession, but it chilled investigators and stuck with them. Brückner by then was back in Germany. He had spent time in and out of prison for various charges, most recently a brutal rape of a 72-year-old American woman in Praia da Luz in 2005. The details of that case were horrifying. He broke into her apartment wearing only a mask, tied her up, beat her, and filmed the assault. Despite the horror of his record, German authorities couldn't pin Madeleine's disappearance on him. Not yet. There were circumstantial links, yes. His proximity, his disturbing tendencies, his cold statements, even physical evidence collected in later searches, storage devices, buried belongings, possible traces from old crime scenes. But nobody, no direct forensic evidence, no confession. And Brückner was stonewalling. He issued letters from prison denying involvement, branding the investigation a farce. He refused to answer police questions, refused to give an alibi, and refused to explain why he was near the scene that night. But he never explicitly denied being there, never proved he wasn't. He always left just enough room for doubt, one investigator remarked. He doesn't panic, he stalls, he hides behind legal silence. In 2020, German prosecutors announced that they believed Madeleine McCann was dead and that Brückner had murdered her. But still, no charges. The case once again stalled, but now there was a name attached, a shadow that had always been in Praia da Luz. And the countdown had already begun, because Christian Brückner wouldn't stay locked up forever. By the time Christian Brückner emerged as the prime suspect in Madeleine McCann's disappearance, investigators had begun pulling apart not just his movements, but his mind. What they found was chilling. According to several reports compiled by both German police and private investigators, Brückner displayed an obsessive fixation on young, blonde girls, eerily matching Madeleine's appearance. Witnesses from his past recalled the way he spoke about taking children, often in crude, sinister tones. He viewed them as objects, conquests, targets. In a disturbing account from a former associate, Brückner once bragged about breaking into holiday homes and watching children as they slept. He knew how to get in without being seen, the man said. He took pleasure in it. But it wasn't just talk. In 2016, a search of a remote property in northern Germany, where Brückner had once lived off-grid, turned up a hidden stash beneath the remains of a dog buried in the yard. Investigators found USB drives, CDs, and other digital storage devices. On them, thousands of images and videos, many depicting child sexual abuse. Some files had been encrypted, others were sorted and labeled. All were carefully hidden. A seized laptop, believed to have belonged to Brückner, further suggested his interest in child exploitation forums. He had allegedly used the dark web and encrypted messaging apps to engage with other offenders, exchanging techniques for grooming and abduction. Still, no image of Madeleine, and Brückner wasn't talking. From his prison cell, he issued letter after letter proclaiming his innocence. He claimed the case against him was media fiction. He dismissed the evidence as coincidence. He refused outright to provide an alibi for the night of May 3, 2007. He would not reveal who had called him for 30 minutes that night. He offered no names, no places, no timeline. Even more suspicious, he made no effort to explain away the evidence that had piled up. "It's a wall of silence," one German prosecutor told The Sun, "but a very calculated wall." Then, in 2023, an investigative team from Channel 4 and The Sun uncovered new leads. A former friend of Brückner's, living in Germany, claimed the suspect had once described a remote reservoir near Silves, about 30 miles from Praia da Luz, as a perfect place to hide something. "He spoke of it like he knew it well," the friend said, "like it had swallowed secrets." In response, Portuguese and German police conducted a 3-day forensic search around the Arade Dam. Divers combed the lakebed. Ground-penetrating radar was used in the nearby scrubland. Cadaver dogs were deployed. They found fragments, fabric, bones, believed to be animals, a small hair clip, but once again, no forensic link to Madeleine. Despite it all, the van, the phone call, the disturbing hard drives, the haunting statements, there remained nobody, no DNA, no definitive trace tying Christian Brückner to the 3-year-old girl who vanished without a sound. And yet, for investigators on the case, there is no doubt. German prosecutors remain convinced Madeleine is dead and that Brückner is responsible. They have spoken with rare certainty for a case so lacking in hard proof, but they also acknowledge the impasse. "We believe we know who did it," one official said, "but believing is not enough in court." And Christian Brückner, master of silence, was biding his time, because his clock was still ticking, and freedom was getting closer with each passing month. Christian Brückner isn't in prison for what happened to Madeleine McCann. Not yet. Instead, the 48-year-old sits behind bars for an equally chilling crime committed just 2 years before Madeleine vanished, one that unfolded within walking distance of the Ocean Club in Praia da Luz. In September 2005, a 72-year-old American tourist was attacked in her villa. She had come to the Algarve for its sun and peace. But on a quiet night, she was brutally raped and beaten by a man wearing a black mask. He tied her up, struck her repeatedly, and filmed the assault on a camcorder. She would later describe the assault as animalistic, saying he moved with precision, like he had done it before. For years, the case went cold. But in 2018, forensic evidence finally caught up with Brückner. His DNA, pulled from preserved samples, matched. German courts convicted him of aggravated rape. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. It was justice. But it wasn't enough. Because Brückner, as it stood, would be a free man by early 2025. And this time, he wouldn't be hiding in the Algarve. He had other places in mind. German prosecutors had made it clear since 2020. They believe he killed Madeleine McCann. But belief wasn't a conviction. They were still building a case, one that had to be bulletproof if they were to charge him with murder. Without a body or direct forensic links, they were relying on witness testimony, circumstantial patterns, and digital trails. It wasn't ready. But Brückner, he was ready to leave. And he wasn't being shy about it. In several communications with journalists and legal intermediaries, Brückner refused to confirm he would stay in Germany upon release. He cited his rights, his privacy, and his wish to start over. When pressed, he simply said, "I will go where I am safest." That comment set off alarms in Braunschweig, Berlin, and London. Because if Brückner fled to a non-extradition country, say Turkey, Russia, or Morocco, prosecutors could lose him forever. No trial, no accountability, no closure for the McCanns. The scenario wasn't far-fetched. Brückner had lived under the radar for most of his adult life. He spoke multiple languages. He had used false IDs and forged documents before. He had money stashed, proceeds from drugs, theft, and scams. He knew how to disappear. And this time, the entire world would be watching. So the countdown began. German authorities had a narrow window to file formal charges, serious ones, or see their prime suspect vanish beyond their reach. The British police, too, were under pressure. Madeleine was a British citizen, and Operation Grange, though downsized, still had officers on call. But without German cooperation and definitive new evidence, their hands were tied. "It's a race against time," one senior investigator told The Sun, "and we don't know how much of it we have left." Meanwhile, Brückner played the role he had perfected for years, the silent man behind the glass. No alibi, no explanations, just cold, blank eyes. And beyond the prison gates, the clock ticked louder. It was a twist no one saw coming. For years, investigators feared Christian Brückner might escape justice by walking free when his sentence for a previous rape expired. But few imagined that his path to freedom would hinge on a £1,300 court fine, and even fewer imagined who would pay it. Brückner, like many convicts, was carrying outstanding legal debts, specifically 2 old fines from unrelated cases, a 2016 conviction for drunk driving and forging documents, and a 2017 court levy for assault. The total, €1,500, roughly £1,300. He had managed to pay just £210 of it, and without full payment, the remaining fine extended his prison sentence until late January 2025. In bureaucratic terms, the fine was minor. In strategic terms, it was vital leverage. But then, in September 2024, that leverage vanished, along with the unpaid balance. An anonymous payment landed in the Braunschweig court system, clearing the debt in full. Brückner's early release was now locked in. German authorities had weeks, maybe days, before he walked out of prison. For a brief moment, it seemed the world's most wanted suspect was slipping away, quietly and legally. Then the email arrived. Sent to the Braunschweig Public Prosecutor's Office, the message bore an unusual signature, a former BKA employee, once part of Germany's elite federal police unit. Not just any ex-cop, one who had at one point investigated Brückner herself. She had paid the fine, and now she wanted the money back. "I was not aware that Christian B. had been convicted in previous cases, including forgery," she wrote. "I therefore wish to contest my declaration of intent to repay the payment and invalidate the legal transaction accordingly." To say the prosecutors were stunned would be an understatement. The identity of the donor had been confidential until now. Her message revealed a stunning lapse in due diligence. She had believed, she claimed, that the fine was a routine case involving a man with no serious history. She now understood otherwise. "I had no personal contact with Christian B.," she added. "I made the payment in error." How could an ex-investigator, trained in background checks and criminal profiling, make such a mistake? Insiders say the payment had likely been facilitated through bureaucratic channels or a legal intermediary. She might have thought she was aiding in a routine prisoner support program, or perhaps she was acting on moral or religious impulse. Whatever the reason, her realization came too late, but not entirely too late. The Braunschweig office issued a statement. "We are investigating the extent to which the payment received in the criminal case against Christian B. can actually be credited toward the fine imposed. We have found evidence that the payment may have been made by mistake." The legal team now had to determine whether the transaction could be invalidated under German law. If successful, Brückner would still owe the court money and, crucially, remain behind bars for weeks or even months longer. It wasn't much time, but in this case, every day mattered. A few dozen days could allow police to finalize charges, could pressure a reluctant witness to come forward, could open the door to a final confession, or at least keep Brückner from vanishing into a country with no extradition treaty. "This error," one official noted privately, "might become our last legal anchor." But it wasn't guaranteed. The legal mechanics of refunding a voluntarily paid fine are murky. Once the funds were processed, the case file updated, and the prison notified, undoing it would require more than a refund. It would require a legal reversal of intent. Essentially, the donor had to prove that her payment was made under false pretenses or gross misjudgment. The ex-cop had done something few people ever do: pay to free a man she once investigated. And in doing so, she had inadvertently unlocked the prison door for Germany's most notorious suspect. Now she was trying to slam that door shut again. For prosecutors, the irony was sharp. After years of high-tech searches, forensic analysis, and international investigations, the final barrier holding Brückner in place was a clerical transaction. One woman's remorse. If the reversal failed, Brückner could be free within days. If it succeeded, it could buy time. Time to charge him. Time to stop him. Time for justice. If it was ever coming at all. When the former BKA agent sent her email retracting the payment, she didn't just reopen a legal file. She reopened a window that law enforcement believed had already slammed shut. Could a voluntary fine be reversed once processed? That was the question now facing prosecutors in Braunschweig, and the answer wasn't straightforward. In theory, fines paid on behalf of a prisoner are final. German law does allow for a withdrawal of intent in legal transactions if the party can demonstrate misunderstanding, error, or coercion, but only in limited circumstances. This wasn't a supermarket return policy. The courts had to consider whether the payment now registered and processed through the system could be legally invalidated. Their public statement was measured but direct. We are investigating the extent to which the payment received in the criminal case against Christian B. can actually be credited toward the fine imposed. We have found evidence that the payment may have been made by mistake. Translation: they weren't ruling it out. Until a formal decision was reached, Brückner remained behind bars. Not for the rape, not for Maddie, but because of a technicality involving a partial fine and an ex-cop's conscience. For those tracking the case, it felt like watching a chess clock tick down. The moment the legal window closed, the board would flip, and Brückner could walk out a free man. Behind the scenes, pressure was mounting. German authorities were urging their British counterparts to re-engage actively. UK police, through Operation Grange, had kept a skeleton team on the case since 2015, but Scotland Yard had scaled down their involvement after years without progress. Now, there was new urgency. "We need the British to act, now," said one German official familiar with the case. "If we lose him, we lose the last chance for justice." Brückner, for his part, remained silent. He had made no public statement since the fine was paid. No interviews, no denials, just the steady rhythm of a man who knows time is moving in his favor. What made the situation surreal wasn't just the legal complexity, but the symbolism. Here was a man suspected of abducting and murdering one of the most famous missing children in the world, and his future, for the moment, hinged on the regret of a single woman. A woman who once swore to uphold justice. A woman who, knowingly or not, may have become the last person with power to stop him. She had made a mistake, but in that mistake lay the faint outline of an opportunity. If the fine could be rescinded, Brückner's release would be delayed. Investigators would have time to finalize a case, to coordinate international efforts, to pin down final evidence before he slipped away, possibly for good. "We're not just racing a legal deadline," said one British source. "We're racing a man who's spent his life evading justice." It was a razor-thin line between resolution and retreat, and it was moving fast. The Madeleine McCann case remains one of the most enduring mysteries of our time. 18 years later, there is no body, no confession, and no trial. Just photographs frozen in time, a family left in limbo, and a suspect whose name now darkens every theory. Yet, for the first time in years, there is momentum. The cracks in the system that once let Christian Brückner disappear into shadows may finally be letting light back in. If prosecutors act, if the UK recommits resources, if the legal reversal holds, if the evidence survives the courtroom. So many ifs. But at last, some motion. The woman who paid his fine may have done so in error. But in her regret lies a haunting possibility that justice, delayed for nearly 2 decades, might still emerge from the unlikeliest of turns. In this story, the line between right and wrong, freedom and prison, justice and silence is razor thin. And maybe, just maybe, One person's mistake might be the justice Madeleine never had.